Good, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Neifeld, one of the principals at Agency One. On behalf of my partners in our amazing Agency One team, I am thrilled to welcome everyone to our bi-weekly webinar series. This is the 17th webinar that we have hosted this year, and all of the webinars, with the exception of 2, have been recorded and can be found on either the Agency One website or on our YouTube channel. If you are looking for information on case design, marketing, products, underwriting, premium financing, the economy, insight from industry experts, and I can go on and on, we have a webinar or a one idea that provides the information you are looking for. So I encourage you to access the Agency One website for all of this information and a whole lot more. For those of you that are new to Agency One, a brief introduction. We are a very high-touch, exclusive BGA. Exclusive, what does that mean? We have a platform called the Agency One 100, and one of our guiding principles is to work with a small, select group of advisors in a very large way. The advisors that are part of this group are like-minded, highly successful, creative, and driven. We focus on life insurance and fixed annuities. If you have other needs, like disability or life settlements or standalone long-term care, we have strategic relationships with the best providers in the industry to refer you to. We truly have the premier underwriting department in the industry, led by my partner, Dennis Bartos, and advanced markets and case design departments led by my partner, Gonzalo Garcia. And I'm not prejudiced, believe me. If you want high touch, personalized attention, advocacy, and want to feel like you and your cases are important, then Agency One is or should be your BGA. If you are wondering why your 2021 production has not met your 2021 goals, then you're probably not working with Agency One. If you'd like to learn more about us, the Agency One 100 platform, and how you can become a part of it, or if you have a case that you would like to discuss, please reach out to us. I would like to introduce now our speaker for today, Fletcher Brown. Fletcher is the president of Kalamath Consulting Group, the leading exit planning consulting firm focused on helping business owners benefit from their life's work through the creation of an exit plan based on the owner's exit objectives. Over the past 20 years, Fletcher has participated in thousands of exit plans with an aggregate value of more than $500 million. That was with a B, billion. As an industry expert in exit planning and with strategic relationships in the fields of mergers and acquisitions, Fletcher writes and speaks frequently on the topic to groups of business owners and advisors to businesses across the country. Fletcher is going to talk about business owner exit planning and how Kalamath Consulting works with advisors like you to provide value and solutions to your business owner clients. Please get out your notepad and pens and start to make a list of all your business owner clients, because you are going to want to reach out to them after the end of this webinar. At the end of the presentation, Fletcher will try to respond to your questions. Please submit them through the question feature at the bottom of the screen. This session is being recorded, and I am now going to turn this session over to Fletcher. Take it away.
Thanks, Kathy, and thank you to Agency One for having me on this webinar. As Kathy mentioned, I've been this is my 20th year in the exit planning arena, and 20 years ago, this past September, I started a company. Just to give you a little background, I started a company called Business Enterprise Institute, or BEI, which you may have heard of. And BEI is a company that helps advisors create exit plans for their business owning clients. So if you said, oh, I really like exit planning and I'd love to learn how to do this myself, BEI is the solution. In that company, I started with my father, John Brown, who was an estate planning attorney here in the Denver area, and he wrote a book called How to Run Your Business So You Can Live It in Style. And out of that book came the concepts of exit planning. And so we took those concepts and brought that to market through Business Enterprise Institute. And that was 20 years ago. And so for 15 years, he and I grew BEI, and it was a wonderful experience. I have a lot of fond memories of that experience from a family business ownership perspective. So not only have I seen a lot of exit plans, but I've also participated in inside a family business. And so I understand a lot of the challenging dynamics that may appear. From that experience, I created Kalamath Consulting Group. And Kalamath really it's the opposite of what BEI does. Kalamath is here to act as a strategic advisor for you to create exit plans for your business owning clients. So think of us as any other trusted advisor, like your CPA or like an estate planning attorney that you would bring in to a planning scenario with a business owner. I am a member of Vistage with the Trusted Advisor Group, the Galliard Institute Family Firm Institute, and a certified exit planner. Exit planning has been in my blood for quite some time. For Kalamath Consulting, we have 3 areas of focus. The first one is business asset protection. The second one is exit planning, and the third one is mergers and acquisitions. I wanted to mention these 2 because today we're going to focus on exit planning. But if you have a client that says, oh, I just want to get out, I want to sell my business, we can certainly help you. Or if you have a client that's not ready to create an exit plan, but does want to focus on increasing value, create some business continuity in case of the what if, and understand how much cash they need to get to meet their post-ownership financial objective, which we'll talk about in a second, then we can certainly help from the asset protection side. So we are here to help business owners transition out of their business. And I think it's probably one of the most critically important financial events of their lives. Most business owners will only have one shot at successfully transitioning out of their company. And in order to do that, we want to plan. What's interesting about saying the word plan is that we know 81% of owners out there want to stop working in their business in the next 10 years. But this slide is pre-COVID. So that 81% is probably higher now, and it's probably less than 10 years. And as I alluded to, it's interesting using the word plan, because every business owner, when they started their company, they probably created a business plan. They went through a SWOT analysis and they determined what their strengths and weaknesses are, and they put it out to market and tested some different theories, and they built a business, and they built a successful business. But we know that very little owners have put their plans into writing as to how they're going to leave their business. So if you take a step back and you think about it, 8 out of 10 owners that you speak with do not have an idea of how they want to transition out of their business. I shouldn't say an idea. They don't have a plan. They haven't put their thoughts into writing of how they want to transition out of their company. So there's a significant opportunity for us to help them in that process. We do know that every owner at some point is going to leave their business. It's an inevitability. So who can benefit from exit planning? When you think of the business owners that you are working with, or that you are having an initial conversation with, or that you are prospecting to, think about how many of those are privately held corporations, probably the vast majority of them. And then if they have more than $4 million in business value, not top line revenue, but value, that person can benefit from exit planning. And ideally, we're trying to find an owner that has $1 million in net revenue, income, cash flow, distributions, however the owner wants to define that, for planning purposes, right? And so if we look at the different types of recommendations, which you'll see in a second, that we can make from a planning perspective, we want to make sure that the owner can use some available cash to implement the recommendations that we're going to make. In addition to that, as you look inside and think to yourself, well, what other areas may arise from an identification perspective? Some owners have succession issues. And so you may talk to owners and they may say, I have a son or daughter involved in the business, or I'm the second generation, and I'm trying to figure out how to pass this business to the third generation. I really want to create some family legacy or maintain family legacy. Or I've been approached by a friendly competitor and they want to buy my business, and what's the best way to do that? So these owners may have some succession issues, they may have some continuity issues, and a lot of owners haven't addressed what happens if my key employee walks out the door, or what happens if my key employee doesn't walk in the door tomorrow morning for some reason. They also have growth issues, and that could be from a management perspective, or growing value, or growing cash flow. So any business owner out there, privately held, with 4 million in value and has good cash flow, that has some issues, we can certainly help them from an exit planning perspective. The types of companies that we help, we're really industry agnostic. And so this is a listing of the past couple of exit plans that we've done over the past 12 months, from architectural firms to construction, CPG in the food and auto parts, digital marketing, SEO. Exit planning can benefit almost every business owner out there. Where it doesn't work is a better way to describe this. Where it doesn't work is with the medical field. So doctors, dentists, any medical practice that's going to have some fairly significant professional licensing already has a well-defined path for the planning purposes. So why should you consider exit planning? Well, it's a new client marketing approach, right? It's great to go out and talk to prospective clients about an exit planning process, or what they're going to do with their business, or have they been approached by a buyer, or can their kids take it over? It's also a great way to retain existing clients so they don't walk out the door and go down the street to somebody else who can help service them. It also provides multiple revenue opportunities inside of each exit plan, which we'll talk about in a second. And as we all know, a happy client makes for a great referral source. So from our perspective, there are a variety of ways to generate additional revenue opportunities for you through the exit planning process. And that could be, and we're going to talk more detail about some of these, that could be updating or creating a personal financial plan, certainly different types of insurance implementation, key man, key person, deferred comp, buy, sell, death, disability, premium financing, the estate tax funding. The whole estate tax world is changing. We don't know what it's going to be, but we do know that change is coming. And I think anytime there's change can create conversation. And as long as we're in front of the conversation with some good planning ideas, we're always going to retain or capture new clients. And then lastly, exit planning provides a great way to stay involved with the business owner through the transition of their company and capture those assets on the back end. We know that for most owners, the business is their largest asset there, and it's illiquid. And so we need to create a liquidity event for them to move on. Our exit planning process is owner driven. So we don't sell any products. We don't provide any financial planning advice. We don't manage assets. We are consultants. And that's all we are. We work with you to help keep you involved as long as you want to be involved through the planning process. And again, I think this is a great way to retain clients and develop new opportunities. So what is exit planning? Well, exit planning is a comprehensive process that allows owners to transition out of their business when they want, to sell it to whoever they want, and to get the amount of money that they need to live their lifestyle. And it's an established process that creates a written exit plan, and that exit plan is going to include recommendations from us and actionable steps that the business owner can take to implement and achieve their exit objectives. The exit planning process is based off of the 7 steps. And we're going to go through the 7 steps in some detail here. So the first step is setting the owner's exit objectives. And every owner has a core set of exit objectives. And the first one is timing. How much longer does the owner want to own the business and work in the business? And typically what we find is that if we can help the owner take a step back and transition some key responsibilities that they don't enjoy doing to somebody else. They're willing to own the business a little longer. And that ultimately can help us pre-fund the exit by having the owner transition more cash out and put it into an investment account, which leads into the second exit objective, determining the owner's post-ownership financial objective. And that's a real wordy way of saying, how much cash does the owner need to sock into the retirement account so they can live their lifestyle? So the first one is time. The second one is how much cash do they need? And then the third exit objective that all owners have is, who do they want to transition this business to, an insider or a third party? And those exit objectives are fluid. They can range based upon what an owner is trying to accomplish. So for instance, if an owner says, oh, I'd like to get out tomorrow, so it's a short time frame, and I know how much cash I need $5 million, let's sell it to a third party. That can, depending on the scenario, maybe that can happen, as opposed to an owner who says, boy, I'd like to get out soon, but I want to transition it to my family members, but my family members, I don't know if they have the skill set or the capacity to take over my business. The timing on that internal transfer may be a little longer. Maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 5 years. And so as we work with the owner to determine their exit objectives, we also start to build realistic expectations around what they can do with what they have. So once we understand their exit objectives, then we want to quantify their available resources. We want to understand what's the business value, what is the current cash flow, and what is the owner's personal balance sheet? How large are their investments outside of the business? And really what we're trying to determine is there a financial gap between what they have, their personal assets and the value of the business, and what they're trying to achieve, the number needed to retire? And so if the business is worth $7 million and they have $3 million in investable assets for a total of 10, but their post-ownership financial objective is $15 million, we know there's a $5 million gap. And once we understand how large that gap is, then we can move to step 3 and focus on increasing business value and close that gap. So how do we grow value? How do we minimize taxable income? And how do we help that owner take a step back and transition responsibilities to an executive team, key employees, or build a management team? It's also important to note that growing value can mean a lot of things to a lot of different business owners. It could mean implementing different sales strategies, creating better financial controls, looking at different ways to market, looking at different go-to-market strategies, different ways to operate, or certainly if everybody's aware of the current crisis at our ports, so different ways to find parts and develop them in country and continue to use that from a manufacturing perspective and not rely on the parts that are sitting out on ships. So there are a lot of ways to grow value and to continue to grow cash flow. And we tend to utilize a group of great business consultants to help in that process. EOS is another very popular tool to use right now. So we help to grow value and close that financial gap. And then we look at, well, what's the best way based on the owner's exit objectives to transition the business? Is it to an insider, a family member, or a key employee? And if we started a key employee for a second, inside of Kalamath, we can put together a very sophisticated cash flow design spreadsheet that will show an owner, based upon a number of years, say 3 or 4 years, how a key employee can get bonused some stock, and then use that stock, use the cash flow from that stock, the distribution, to continue to purchase more stock. And after a certain time frame, say 3 or 4 years, go to the commercial banker that's been involved in the process and effect a buyout, where the bank's willing to fund the deal and where we know that the debt load on top of the business won't suffocate it from growing. And so there's a very defined path from a key employee perspective or a key employee group perspective when we transition the business to an insider. And it's very tactical. If we talk about family for a second, we take the same approach. It can be very tactical. The difference is that there's a lot of emotion with insider transfers, from father to next generation or mother to next generation. And what we tend to initially uncover is when we talk to the owner, does the owner see their kids as kids still, or as potential business partners? And once we can understand the viewpoint from the owner, then we can start to help the owner transition out emotionally from the business and also tactically from an exit planning perspective. Step 5, moving on, is a sale to a third party. And so if a business owner doesn't have family members or a desire to create family legacy inside of a business, or key employees that he or she feels are capable of taking over the company, then we typically look at selling the business to a third party, whether that's a strategic buyer or a private equity group. And all third-party sales that I've been a part of are set in a controlled auction setting, which I'm happy to talk in further detail about. Step 6 and 7 are contingency planning steps. And so step 6 is business continuity. What happens if? What happens if you, owner, don't make it in tomorrow, or one of your key employees doesn't? Or if one of your key employees is approached by, say, a competitor down the street, how do we make sure that we create continuity inside of your management team, your executive team, and to some extent, some succession in case something happens to you? And then step 7, some contingency planning for the owner's family from an estate planning perspective. And we use estate planning techniques, some wealth strategy, design, and transfer techniques, especially if there are family members involved in the transition of the business to an insider. We can look at different ways to gift stock from the first generation to second, or second to third, or what have you. And what is the most appropriate planning vehicle to use based upon the owner's desires and tax planning situations. So that's the exit planning process. And the process itself is holistic in that it's all centered around helping an owner achieve their exit objectives. So the ingredients to a successful exit are, number 1, an exit plan based upon an owner's exit objectives. We know, and I didn't mention this in the earlier slide, but in order to have a successful exit plan, we have to have a good personal financial plan. And that financial plan really sets the stage for how we're going to make recommendations through that planning process. And so we know that if we have a good exit plan based upon the owner's exit objectives, and it's designed around how much cash they need to get out of the company, then we can ultimately achieve what they're going to need. Secondly, an experienced team of advisors to design and implement this plan is very important. And so when we go through the designing process of an exit plan, we share it with everybody. We share each draft with you to make sure that the recommendations that we're making you agree with, or that you if you want to add any recommendations to the planning process, we certainly welcome all of the input to make sure that we're giving the best advice that we can to the business owner. And then third, cash flow, and really understanding what the business value is. And that cash flow is important. We want to make sure that the cash flow continues and that it continues to grow at an annual rate to support the operations of the implementation of the exit plan inside of the business. Fourth, a strong management team. And we see a lot of business owners, when we get first introduced to them, who are still operating many areas of the business, whether it's operations and finance, or sales and marketing, or sales and finance. There's always a lot of crossover. And so giving them the ability to shed some responsibility and create a strong management team is very important to having a successful exit, and whether that's a sale to a third party or a transition to an insider. And then lastly, time. The more time we have, the more success we can have with the business owner. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't help owners who say, oh, I want to exit tomorrow. We can still certainly help them. But generally speaking, we're going to be able to provide additional value if an owner says, I'd like to exit in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. The more time we have to plan, the more we're able to help that owner successfully transition out. So benefits to exit planning. Number one, we're going to maximize value, which is important from a private equity perspective. How do we make sure that if a private equity buyer drives by the business, they see that business as exceptionally valuable in their eyes? Number two, we're going to minimize risk, certainly during the transition, and we're going to minimize any risk of unnecessary or excessive taxes. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly, we're going to develop a plan that allows the business owner to stay in control of his or her business until they've met all of their exit objectives. So they don't give up control at any one point until they are ready to. So let's talk about how we work together. We first have a where are they call with every advisor out there. And so if you think through your existing client book, or if you're looking at other business owners or thinking about other business owners that you're talking to, and you want to have a little strategy session about where they are and the best way to approach them with exit planning, or what questions to ask, that's the first step. And so we get on the telephone with you and we have a where are they call. The second way that we work together is after we have the where are they call, once we understand where they are, then let's have a joint introduction call. And that joint introduction call is with you and Kalamath Consulting Group, myself, and the business owner. And we talk about what the exit planning process is, and we talk about how an owner can maximize their value and put additional cash into their pockets through the planning process. And then we start to ask about what planning that they have done and what their personal financial needs are. And so the idea between the where are they call and joint introduction call is that you, advisor, and I are on the same page, so that we're supporting your planning, any plans that you've done to date through the planning process, and we're telling the business owner, hey, listen, we're off to a great start, and we think we can build upon it, and here are maybe some things to consider. So it's very much an educational based introduction call. The third call that we have is with you and the business owner, and that's where we present an exit plan and readiness assessment. And the readiness assessment really helps us to understand the scope of work, or the scope of the project that we're going to be creating a proposal for. In addition to that, at any one point in any of these calls, if we find that the owner simply needs to have a good introduction to an estate planning attorney or a business coach, or maybe a specific valuation specialist, then we certainly can make that. And if there's an immediate need that we can resolve right away, we try and do that. The exit planning readiness assessment is a great way for us to take a deep dive and understand how ready is this business owner, what aspects have they addressed, what aspects have they not addressed, and where can we add value to their potential exit plan or planning process. And then finally, from that readiness assessment, we put together a proposal and we present it to the business owner. And we really feel that after 3 meetings, with 1 with you and 2 with the business owner, we're going to have a good idea of what the scope of this project is, and how to keep everybody involved, what we're going to present, and the value that we can deliver to the owner. So there are a variety of tools from us that you can use when you meet with and talk to business owners. The first one is myself or Carrie Fry, who is our director of partnerships. We would love to get on the telephone with you and talk through a quick marketing session to help you gain any knowledge or tools that you want to have an initial conversation with the business owner. If you need any questions to ask or how to ask them, we can certainly assist in that process. And then secondly, we have an exit planning marketing kit that we would love to send to you with some probing questions, a couple white papers, some newsletters, and also a webinar that's presented by us. And so as I wrap up with my presentation here, I'd like to leave you with a couple of questions that you can take and ask any business owner today. And I tend to find that these are great questions to ask because they're open-ended and it generates conversation. And conversation always leads to additional connection and the ability to make an introduction. So Kathy.
Yes. Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Did any questions come up?
They did. So let's get to them right now. Thanks, Fletcher. The first question that came in, and I thought that this was really interesting, deals with, many companies have um, a B2B CFO.
Yep.
And how would you compare or contrast Calumet to that B2B CFO? Where are the similarities? Where are the differences? If a company does have that role filled, where do you fit in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a B2B CFO does a couple of things. Number one, they have a lot of focus on fractional or part-time CFO work, which is fantastic if the company needs that to develop additional financial controls, clean up their books, what have you. B2B CFO also has their own exit planning process or program that I think is a great first step. And if the business owner is comfortable with that process, then fantastic. I think our process is going to be more unique and more tailored to the owner's exit objectives. And we're going to bring in a set of advisors with you and work with the owner's other advisors to help create an exit plan and then implement the exit planning process. And so I don't know what B2B CFO's implementation track is like, but from our perspective, once we create an exit plan, we're working with the owner anywhere from 12 to 18 months to 5 to 7 years. And so we're with the owner all the way through the implementation of their exit plan.
12 to 18 months to 5 to 7 years. 12 to 18 months sounds much more appealing than 5 to 7 years. But along those lines, two questions, which also came in. One of the questions was, and let's not go over 5 to 7 years, because I know everybody has something to do probably at the top of the hour. But the question was, please describe your physical contact with the clients in the course of an engagement. And along those lines, from your vantage point, when is the optimal time to introduce Kalamath to the business owner client? And when is it, I know you're going to say it's never too late, but in your world, the best time is when, and then talk about the physical contacts with the clients over the course of the engagement.
Yep. Yeah. So the best time for us to get introduced to a business owner is within 5 years of their desired departure date. Now, I know every owner says, well, I'm going to retire in 5 years, and they keep pushing that out. So if you have an owner who's rolling that 5-year date, that's a great time for us to get introduced to them. Other times that it's good for us to get introduced to owners is if they have kids involved in the business, or if they have hit the age of 60, then it's great for us to get introduced to that owner. At some point, there's going to be either a financial event, a life event, or a family event that causes the owner to raise their hand and say, I need a little help. And so we're trying to get in front of one of those three.
Okay.
The way that we engage with business owners is straightforward. So the first meeting we have with an owner is by webcast or by Microsoft Teams. And that initial meeting is for us to introduce them to the exit planning process, 30 minutes. And from that meeting, then we have a follow-up meeting, which is the presentation of the exit planning readiness assessment. And that's another 30-minute Microsoft Teams webcast. So that's the second meeting. The third meeting is the presentation of our proposal, Microsoft Teams. Once we get engaged, then we get on a plane and we go out and visit with the business owner. And we spend a one-day strategy session going through who they are, what they're trying to accomplish, what's in their business, what do they have, and really understanding what their ultimate exit objectives are. And that usually takes a day. And then we fly back home, put together a draft plan, share it with you, and ask for your input to make sure that we're on the same page. As we go through and we create several drafts, we share those with the owner and we talk to them via telephone. And then when we are ready to fly back out and meet with the owners, or when we're ready to meet with the owner's advisor team, we get on the plane and we fly back out. So that's our second in-person visit. And then we fly back, update the plan. And then when we're ready to present this plan to the owner and their constituents and anybody else who's involved, then we fly back out for a third time. And that third presentation or that third meeting is really a transition from we've created the plan to now let's start to implement the recommendations that we're making. And then from there, we transition to a quarterly meeting with the business owner. So we end up having several calls with the owner up front, and then we have at least 3 meetings with the owner throughout the course of the development of the exit plan, and then we meet with the owner by teams afterward. Now, there's a caveat to that, and that is that there aren't multiple owners involved in the business. If there are multiple owners involved in the business, we're probably making a few more trips.
All right, so you use the term implementation, and I'm going to focus on the term execution. Maybe one and the same, but let's take a step back. So we're talking with a group of advisors here, and the advisors are the ones that are going to introduce you to their clients, right? So do you have a phone call with the advisor first to say, okay, kind of give me the skinny on who these people are, what they want to accomplish, and what have you been recommending all of these years that they can't seem to or have not been willing to move forward with yet? Does that happen?
That's absolutely what happens. That's our very first phone call. Yep. And then tell us a little bit more about the client, and then let's get on the phone with the client and let us support you through our planning process by way of highlighting what you have done and then asking questions around what the client wants to accomplish. And that's where we can really help bridge the gap and move them forward and create some actionable steps.
Right. So in many ways, you are reinforcing the recommendations or some of the recommendations that have been made prior to your introduction. And now the business owner is hearing it from an independent third party that they've hired and is reinforcing what they've been hearing by their advisor.
Yeah, we start the reinforcement at the very first call. So whether we've been hired or not, we're an advocate for the planning that the advisor has already done.
Perfect. And how much are you? And I know you're going to say it depends who you're asking. But generally speaking, what are the fees?
That's a great question. So as a consultant, we have 2 primary areas that we focus on. The first one is the creation of an exit plan. And the creation of an exit plan generally ranges from $15,000 to $50,000. And there are different factors that can cause a plan to go higher rather than lower. When we think about how much to charge, we really think about, well, how complex is this planning case? How many owners are involved? How many generations of ownership are involved? And if we look at how many generations of ownership, how many families within each generation are involved? And so multiple families within multiple generations create a lot of complexity. If it's a sole owner who says, boy, I want to sell my business to a third party, it's probably a lower planning fee because it's pretty straightforward. If it is say 2 sisters who have 3 kids involved in the business, multiple generations, it's going to be more sophisticated and more complex. So that's the first way that we charge a fee. The second way that we charge a fee is through the implementation side of the exit plans. And so an exit plan is, when we develop an exit plan, we create a bunch of recommendations and we say to the business owner, hey owner, here's how you're going to achieve your exit objectives. It's through the implementation of these recommendations. And so we manage the implementation process. Think of us as a quarterback of the exit planning process. And we're going to make sure that all of the recommendations that we make are done either from the estate planning attorney or the CPA or the business planning attorney or the tax planning specialist or what have you. The implementation fee is really, it's very hard to determine without knowing the case But we generally speaking, we say it's anywhere from 30 to 50% of the exit planning fee.
Okay. And once again, this is something that is paid for by the business owner. It is not paid for by the advisor.
Correct. Paid for. And when we first get engaged with an owner, we really talk to the owner about not the fees that we're going to charge, but the budget that they should be establishing for the professional planning fees that they're going to encounter over the next several years. Because it isn't just us that we want the owner to be aware of from a fee perspective. It's also going to be the other advisors at the table. And frankly speaking, the other products that are going to be implemented from the recommendations that we make.
Fair enough. And in terms of your availability, assuming that we've got some folks on the phone that would like to reach out to you and schedule something. The first thing was, how do they get in touch with you? And there it is on the slide. And you can certainly contact Agency One for this. And another question came in, can we get copies of the slides? And the answer is absolutely yes. But, how much room do you have on your plate for new clients coming in now through the end of the year? What, how in terms of how backed up or not you are to help the Agency 100 advisors?
Good question. So to help the Agency One advisors, we have the capacity, and we are certainly here to make the time and effort to help you introduce exit planning to business owners and get some traction going before the end of the year. We know that through business continuity or asset protection or some of the components of the planning process that we can implement before year end, now's the time to start having the conversations with the business owners. And so everybody can see my email address and my telephone number, and Kerry's email address and his telephone number. Again, Kerry is in charge of our development of partnerships, and he or I can get on the telephone and help with the initial conversation, give you some questions to ask, give you a couple of tools to take out and introduce to the business owner. And as soon as they raise their hand, then we're going to help you all the way through the process and hopefully develop an exit plan and get going.
Okay. Great. So 2 more questions came in. One was from the producer, which is, how do they get compensated?
Good question. So because we're independent consultants and we're not licensed to share in fees, we don't share fees. The compensation for you comes from the additional planning opportunities inside of the exit plan itself. So typically when we make recommendations, we see opportunities around key man, deferred comp. There's a lot of business continuity opportunities in there. If you are creating personal financial plans, that's something that's going to happen immediately. If you're gathering assets, that's going to happen on the back end. So I think through the exit planning process, it's a very efficient way to have a lot of revenue opportunities from one client.
You mentioned, thank you. You mentioned being available before year end. And, all of your recommendations obviously are dependent upon not just what does the business owner want his see for the future of his business and what does he want it to look like on the exit, but you have to be focusing on what's happening in Washington. And depending upon what's being implemented in Washington must impact some of the recommendations that you are making. So as part of your process, are you discussing or recommending tax reduction strategies? And how do you go about doing that? What are you looking at and what are you seeing?
We are recommending tax reduction strategies, and we are talking to the owner about the potential change in estate planning tax law coming up. In what we're seeing, I mean, our crystal ball is as murky as ever. So what we are telling the owner is, here's what we're hearing, which is everything that everybody else has been hearing in terms of accelerating the sunset clause and the transition of, or the change in the lifetime gifting amount, right? And so we talk about those two, and we talk about those two from different aspects of what the owner's trying to accomplish. And so it is hard to say, here's what's happening in Washington. We think we should do this. Instead, we're going to say, well, what are you trying to accomplish? And here's how that may affect you. And so we really want to take an owner perspective viewpoint and talk to the owner from here are the different ways that whatever Washington does may affect you. Also, here are the different ways that maybe selling your business to a key employee group or to a third party may affect you. It may change your entire estate planning plan.
Yeah, we are certainly experiencing interesting times right now, and the questions are coming to us, and I'm sure to you, fast and furious, as to what's going to happen, what do I do, how do I advise, and that crystal ball is murky. So another question that just came in, and it bears repeating, and you have emphasized this before, you don't give this advice in a vacuum, and you are working with other centers of influence, so to speak, with these clients. Who are the other advisors that are typically sitting around the table with you if the client is amenable to that?
Good question. Usually every business owner has a CPA. The question is whether or not that's a 1040 CPA or if that's a strategic planning CPA. So we try to determine that up front. And then I tend to find that every owner has talked to or is currently working with an estate planning attorney. So those are the two other advisors that are generally at the table. The advisors that we want to introduce, that we first look to you, the referring advisor, is say a transaction intermediary. If you don't have one, we do, or say a business planning attorney. If you don't have one, we can certainly help in that process, or a tax planning attorney, or a good tax planning CPA firm. Are usually two advisors that we end up introducing into the planning process. And again, we want to look to you, advisor, to dig into your network and say, well, who have I used in the past, and who can potentially make a referral back to me, and let's bring that person to the table. But if you say, oh, hey, Fletcher and Kalamath Consulting, I don't have a good person, we certainly do have some good advisors that we can bring to the table.
Great. What does Calumet stand for?
That's a good question. Calumet was the street name where we had our first business. It was off of Calumet Street.
Nice.
So it rings true to us.
Gotcha. Well, you know what? It's consistent with the importance of a business and history, and respecting where you've come from, and the street takes you to where you're going, I guess. So interesting. Thank you for sharing. I do not see any other questions. So with that, I am going to wrap this up. Here's Gonzalo.
Hey.
Gonzalo, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Hey, everybody. Fletcher, thank you. That was really good. And we look forward to having the opportunity to work with you. I'd just like to throw out one comment. I mean, what's interesting about this whole conversation is that there's such a massive need today. 80+% of people looking to get out in the next 5 years, could be a higher number and could be accelerated. 20% having a plan. And what's interesting about this whole conversation is that when you have a paid consultant, somebody who's writing a check to get advice from Fletcher and Kalamath and the rest of the group there, and they're making recommendations around you should buy key person insurance, or you should have retention bonus plans for your employees, or you should have a deferred compensation arrangement, or you should be looking at your estate plan. They paid for that advice. I mean, you're sitting at the table and you're having somebody say, Mr. Client or Mrs. Client, you need to do this. And Fletcher is making the sale for you. So, we're providing certain solutions and recommendations that the client needs to act on. So, I mean, that's the beauty I see here. And the fact that we're always, trying to find a way to find the money or create solutions for clients or get assets under management or whatever. You've got a client writing a check to get that advice, and you are sitting at the table. So, great opportunity, and hopefully we'll all take advantage of Fletcher's expertise to help us get there. So thank you, Fletcher. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Thank you, Kathy. And for everybody on the webcast, feel free to send me an email. I'd love to have an initial conversation with you and talk about how we can help you move some of these planning clients forward or support you in the process.
Great. Okay, well, thank you, Fletcher. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Kalamath. So Agency One folks, what's next? Our next webinar is going to focus on doing business in the foreign national marketplace, and this is going to take place at the end of October. Please be on the lookout for this invitation. Also, we're going to host another business owner exit planning webinar for family businesses and non-family business owners, featuring real case studies. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we hope to offer this to you in early November. Please be on the lookout for this invitation as well. These are my closing announcements for today. If you have any questions or would like additional information, please reach out to me, Gonzalo, or Dennis. Thank you for joining us. And that concludes the webinar for today. Take care. Thanks.